The crystalline walls of the Galactic Council chamber reflected light from the nearby neutron star, creating patterns that danced across the faces of 23 different alien species. Captain Jiho stood at the center of the massive room, his hands clasped behind his back, his military uniform crisp and neat. Beside him, Ambassador Yuna held a datapad, her fingers tapping nervously on its surface. Behind them, Commander Taeyang and his security team stood at attention, their eyes constantly scanning the chamber. Counselor Vren sat on the highest platform, his elongated form draped in ceremonial robes that glowed with ancient symbols. He was an Etherian, a species that had ruled the Galactic Council for 10,000 years. His voice echoed through the chamber when he spoke, amplified by technology older than human civilization. "Humanity," Vren said, his tone dripping with contempt. "You have been summoned to answer for your crimes against galactic peace." Jiho did not move. He simply watched Vren with calm, dark eyes. "In the 40 years since your species joined galactic society," Vren continued, "you have built weapons that violate 17 different treaties. You have expanded your military presence into sectors that do not belong to you. You have refused to submit to council oversight." He paused, letting his words sink in. "These actions cannot continue." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Representatives from dozens of species nodded their heads or made sounds of approval. Humanity was young, barely a whisper in the long history of the galaxy. They needed to learn their place. Yuna leaned close to Jiho and whispered, "They've already decided. This is just theater." Jiho nodded slightly. He had known this before they arrived. The council had no interest in justice or fairness. They wanted submission. "Captain Jiho," Vren said, gesturing dismissively, "you may speak. Defend your species' actions. If you can." Jiho stepped forward. His boots made soft sounds on the polished floor. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "Counselor Vren, members of the council, I have only one question before I respond to your accusations." Vren's expression showed surprise. He had expected begging or excuses, not questions. "Speak," he said. "Have any of you actually researched human history?" Jiho asked. Silence fell over the chamber. Then, laughter began. It started with a few representatives and spread like wildfire. The sound filled the enormous space, echoing off the crystalline walls. Even Vren allowed himself a thin smile. "Your history," Vren said, still amused. "What does your brief, violent past matter to us? You barely developed faster than light travel 50 years ago. Your planet still bears the scars of your primitive wars. We know everything we need to know about humanity." More laughter, more nods of agreement. Jiho's expression did not change. "I see," he said quietly. Vren raised one long hand, and the laughter stopped. "Humanity, the Council has reached its decision. You will surrender all military assets to Council authority within 72 hours. Your species will be placed under protective custody until we determine you are mature enough to be trusted with weapons of war." He leaned forward. "This is not a negotiation. This is an order." "And if we refuse?" Taeyang asked from behind Jiho, his hand resting on his sidearm. Vren's smile grew colder. "Then the Council will take corrective action. We have 300 warships waiting at your borders. We will disarm you by force if necessary." He looked directly at Jiho. "Do you understand?" Jiho stood silent for a long moment. Around the chamber, representatives watched him with barely concealed satisfaction. They had put the upstart humans in their place. "About time," their expressions seemed to say. Finally, Jiho spoke. His voice was still quiet, still calm. 72 hours, he said. "Correct," Vren replied. "And then you will send your fleet to our territory. If you do not comply, yes," Jiho nodded slowly. Then he looked up, meeting Vren's eyes directly. What the Etherian saw in those human eyes made him uncomfortable, though he did not understand why. There was no fear there, no desperation, just a strange, cold certainty. "Then I have only one thing to say to this council," Jiho said. His voice carried to every corner of the chamber. Run while you can. Our quote within. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Vren laughed, though it sounded forced. Is that a threat, human? It's a warning, Jiho said. The same warning we gave to the last species that tried to threaten Earth. They didn't listen either. There is no record of humanity fighting another species before your official first contact, Vren said, frowning now. Jiho smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I know, he said simply. Confusion rippled through the council. What did that mean? Several representatives began whispering to their aides, demanding explanations. But there were no explanations in the official records. Humanity's history before first contact was clear. They had been alone, fighting only themselves. This council is dismissed, Vren announced, suddenly eager to end the meeting. Humanity has 72 hours. Use them wisely. Jiho bowed slightly, a gesture of minimal respect. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, Yuna and Taeyang following close behind. The security team formed up around them as they left the chamber. Once they were in the corridor outside, away from the council's ears, Yuna let out a breath she had been holding. That went exactly as badly as we expected, she said. No, Jiho replied, pulling a small device from his pocket. That went exactly as we planned. Taeyang watched as Jiho activated the quantum communication device. The small screen glowed blue, and Jiho typed a simple message. Protocol, broken arrow. Authorization code. Endgame. Is that? Yuna began. Yes, Jiho said, pressing send. The message vanished, traveling faster than light back to Earth, back to the military commanders who had been waiting for this exact moment. The council just made the biggest mistake in their history. They don't know, do they? Taeyang asked quietly. About the Devourers. About what we did before they found us. No, Jiho said. They edited our records to make us seem primitive and weak. They wanted to believe we were easy to control. He looked back at the council chamber doors. They're about to learn that humanity has never been easy to control. As they walked toward their ship, alarms began to sound throughout the council station. Not emergency alarms, but the soft chimes that indicated unusual stellar activity. In the distance, through the transparent walls of the corridor, stars began to shimmer strangely. Yuna checked her data pad. Her eyes widened. Gravitational anomalies. Dozens of them. The council's sensors are going crazy. Jiho smiled grimly. Right on schedule, he said. The silent fleet is moving into position. Will they figure it out in time? Taeyang asked. No, Jiho said. By the time they understand what's happening, it will be far too late. They reached their shuttle and climbed aboard. As the craft pulled away from the council station, Jiho looked back one last time at the crystalline structure floating against the stars. Beautiful, he thought. Ancient, powerful, and completely unprepared for what was coming. Run while you can, he whispered again, though no one but himself could hear. Behind them, the council continued its session, completely unaware that they had just started a war they could not possibly win. Scout Minho sat in the depths of the galactic archives, surrounded by holographic displays that showed thousands of years of recorded history. As an Etherean intelligence officer, he had clearance to access almost any file in the database. His assignment was simple: research humanity and find evidence to justify the Council's actions. It should have been easy work. Humanity was young, barely a footnote in galactic history. Yet 3 hours into his research, Minho found himself deeply confused. The human records were incomplete. Large sections of their history were marked as corrupted or missing. Their early space exploration showed gaps of several years with no explanation. Most frustrating of all, their military capabilities seemed wildly inconsistent with what the Council's sensors detected. This doesn't make sense, Minho muttered, pulling up another file. According to official records, humanity had developed nuclear weapons only 200 years ago. They had nearly destroyed themselves in something called the Cold War. They had fought countless wars over resources, territory, and ideology. By all accounts, They were a violent but primitive species that had barely learned to cooperate. Yet 40 years ago, when the Council made official first contact, humanity had already built a fleet of advanced warships. The timeline didn't add up. Building such ships should have taken decades of galactic knowledge and support. How had they done it so quickly? Minho opened a file labeled First Contact Incident. It described a peaceful meeting between Council scouts and human representatives. Simple, clean, unremarkable, but something bothered him about it. The report was too clean, too simple. It read like a story that had been edited, polished, and stripped of anything interesting. He dug deeper, searching through raw sensor logs instead of official reports. That's when he found something strange. Gravitational distortions in the Kuiper belt. Dated 5 years before official first contact. Energy signatures consistent with weapons fire. Debris fields that had been carefully cleaned up. "What were you doing out there?" Minho whispered. A soft sound made him turn. A human woman stood in the doorway of his research alcove. She wore the simple clothes of an archivist, and her identification badge named her as Suji. She had worked in the archives for nearly a decade, one of only 3 humans employed in this section. "Scout Minho," she said politely. "I noticed you've been accessing human records. Do you need assistance?" Minho studied her carefully. She seemed harmless enough, but something about her eyes reminded him of Jiho's gaze in the council chamber. Too calm, too aware. "I'm trying to understand your species' history," he said, "but your records are incomplete." Suji nodded. "Yes. There were data corruption issues during the initial transfer to council systems. We lost a lot of information." She smiled apologetically. Humans aren't always good with technology that old. It was a reasonable explanation, but Minho's instincts, honed by years of intelligence work, told him it was a lie. "What can you tell me about these gravitational anomalies?" he asked, showing her the sensor logs. Suji glanced at the screen. Her expression didn't change. "Probably solar activity. The Kuiper belt is quite far from Earth. We didn't have much presence there before first contact." Another lie, Minho thought. He could hear it in her voice, see it in the way she held herself. "I see," he said. "Thank you for your help." After Suji left, Minho continued his research with renewed determination. If the humans were hiding something, he would find it. The council needed to know what they were dealing with. On Earth, in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath the Atlantic Ocean, Admiral Hyun watched holographic displays showing the positions of every ship in the human fleet. Most people believed humanity had 12 defensive vessels guarding the outer solar system. That was true, but it was also a lie. The real fleet, the silent fleet, consisted of 200 warships, hidden in the empty spaces between star systems. They had been there for 15 years, waiting in the dark. Their engines cold, their weapons ready. "Admiral," a young officer said, approaching Hyun's command station. "We received the broken arrow signal from Captain Jiho." Hyun nodded slowly. He had been expecting this. The council had played exactly as human strategists predicted. Arrogant, overconfident, blind. "Begin fleet activation sequence," Hyun ordered. "Cold start procedures. I want every ship ready to jump in 60 hours. "Yes, Admiral." As the officer hurried away, Hyun allowed himself a moment of sadness. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. Hoped the council would see reason. But hope was a luxury humanity had learned to abandon long ago. "Sir," another officer called out. "We're detecting council surveillance probes near the terminus gate. They're trying to scan our defensive positions." "Let them look," Hyun said. "They'll see exactly what we want them to see." Back in the archives, Minho had been searching for hours. His eyes hurt from staring at screens, and his back ached from sitting. But he couldn't stop. Something was very wrong with the human records, and he needed to understand what. Then he found it. The file was buried deep, marked as historical educational material, approved for archive only. It was video footage, very old, converted from some ancient human format. The title read, "Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 1945. Minho opened the file and watched. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. An aircraft flying over a city. Then a flash of light. Then nothing but destruction. Buildings vaporized. People turned to shadows. An entire city erased in seconds. His hands shook as he read the accompanying text. These were nuclear weapons. Humanity's first nuclear weapons. And they had used them. On themselves. On their own cities. On their own people. By the ancestors, Minho breathed. He kept reading, unable to look away. The bombs had killed over 200,000 humans in seconds. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the date. Humanity had developed and used these weapons over 300 years ago, when they were still bound to a single planet. When they had barely invented computers, they had created weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization before they had even reached their own moon. What kind of species did that? Minho pulled up more files, searching desperately now. He found records of something called the Cold War, two human factions, both armed with thousands of nuclear weapons, both ready to destroy their entire world. The standoff had lasted decades. They had called it mutually assured destruction. They had a name for suicide by nuclear fire. They had planned for it, prepared for it, and somehow, impossibly, they had chosen not to do it. They're insane, Minho whispered. They're all insane. But he kept reading. He learned about World War I, World War II. The death tolls measured in tens of millions. He learned about chemical weapons, biological weapons, weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering. He learned about concentration camps and genocides and horrors that made his species' worst moments look tame. And through it all, humanity had survived. They had clawed their way up from the ashes, again and again, learning and adapting, and refusing to die. Minho sat back, his mind reeling. The council thought humanity was weak because they were young. But youth didn't mean weakness. Not for a species that had spent its entire history fighting itself and somehow surviving. He thought about the 300 warships Councillor Vren had mentioned. The fleet that would enforce the council's will on humanity. Then he thought about Captain Jiho's calm eyes and quiet words. Run while you can. For the first time, Minho felt genuine fear. He pulled up current council fleet positions and compared them to human territory. The math was simple. The council fleet was strong, experienced, equipped with weapons that had maintained peace for thousands of years. But humanity had nuclear weapons before they had television. They had fought wars that killed millions before they had computers. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times and had chosen survival every single time. What would such a species do when someone threatened their existence? Minho's hands moved across the controls, copying files, gathering evidence. He needed to warn someone. The council was making a terrible mistake. A shadow fell across his workspace. He looked up to find Suji standing there again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two other humans flanked her, both wearing expressions that were no longer friendly. Scout Minho, Suji said, and her voice was completely different now. Cold, professional, dangerous. I'm afraid you've accessed classified information. Minho's hand moved toward his communicator, but one of the humans was faster. In a movement almost too quick to see, the device was removed from his belt. Who are you? Minho asked, though he already knew the answer. My name is Suji, she said. I'm the Director of Human Diplomatic Intelligence. I've been working in these archives for 10 years, making sure people like you don't find what you just found. She paused. You're very good at your job. Most investigators never get this far. The council needs to know, Minho said. You can't hide what you are. Suji smiled. But it was sad. We're not hiding. Scout Minho. We've been trying to warn everyone. But nobody listens. She pulled out a data chip. Your people are about to attack us. When they do, they're going to learn the truth the hard way. You can't win against the council, Minho said. But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his voice. We don't want to win, Suji replied. We just want to survive. And humanity is very, very good at surviving. The terminus gate marked the edge of human territory, a region of space where massive gravitational sensors monitored everything that entered or left the solar system. 12 human warships hung in formation around the gate, their hulls dark against the background of stars. They looked small and insignificant compared to what was coming. Commander Taeyang stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Times Defiant Asterisk, watching the sensor displays with calm eyes. He had been a soldier for 20 years, fighting in conflicts that the galaxy didn't know existed. He had seen things that would give Counselor Vren nightmares. This was just another battle. Status report, he said quietly. Lieutenant Nari looked up from her weapons console. All ships report ready. Commander. Defensive grid is active and hidden. The Council fleet is 3 hours out. 300 ships, someone muttered from the back of the bridge. Against our 12. 13, Nari corrected. We're counting the times, Defiant Asterisk. A few nervous chuckles echoed through the bridge. Taeyang, let them have that moment. They would need whatever humor they could find in the next few hours. The 72-hour deadline had expired exactly 30 minutes ago. Captain Jiho's shuttle had barely cleared Council space when Counselor Vren had ordered the fleet to advance. No more negotiation. No more warnings. Just force. Commander, the communications officer called out. Incoming transmission from the Council fleet. It's Marshal Vren. On screen. Taeyang ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a younger version of Counselor Vren. Marshal Vren wore military armor that glowed with the same ancient symbols as his father's robes. Behind him, Taeyang could see the bridge of an enormous dreadnought, filled with officers from a dozen different species. Commander Taeyang of Earth, Marshal Vren said, his voice carrying the same arrogance as his father's. You are in violation of Galactic Council law. Surrender your vessels immediately, or we will be forced to disable them. Taeyang studied the young marshal for a moment. He saw pride there, confidence born from 10,000 years of Council dominance. The absolute certainty that might made right. Marshal, Taeyang replied, I recommend you turn your fleet around. This is your last chance to avoid bloodshed. 9. Marshal Vren laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of amusement and disbelief. Commander, I have 300 warships. You have 12. Whatever weapons you believe you possess, they cannot stand against the combined might of the Council. He leaned forward. I will give you 1 hour to evacuate your ships. After that, we will fire on any vessel that has not surrendered. Load. I am. We looked at it, Ben. No, Taeyang said simply. The marshal's expression hardened. Then you will be destroyed. Maybe, Taeyang said. Or maybe you should have asked why we call this the Terminus Gate. He cut the transmission before Marshal Vren could respond. Nari looked at him with wide eyes. Commander, did you just antagonize him? Yes. Taeyang smiled grimly. Angry people make mistakes. 50 minutes later, the Council fleet arrived at the Terminus Gate. It was an impressive sight. 300 warships of various designs, representing 23 different species. Their shields glowing with power. Their weapons armed and ready. They moved in perfect formation, a display of coordination and strength that had kept the galaxy peaceful for millennia. At the center of the formation, Marshal Vren's dreadnought led the way. It was the largest ship in the fleet, a vessel that had been built 5,000 years ago and upgraded constantly since. It carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The 12 human ships looked like insects by comparison. All ships, Marshal Vren announced over the fleet-wide channel. Prepare to demonstrate our resolve. Target the human mining colony at coordinates 7749. Weapons free. On the Times Defiant Asterisk, alarms began to sound. They're targeting the Callisto mining station, Nari reported, her voice tight. 1,500 civilians. Taeyang's jaw clenched. Activate defensive grid. Protocol Delta 7. Invisible to the Council's sensors, Hidden beneath layers of advanced stealth technology, a network of defensive satellites came to life. They had been placed over the past 15 years, scattered throughout the outer solar system, waiting for exactly this moment. Marshal Vren's ship fired first. A beam of pure energy lanced out toward the mining colony. Powerful enough to vaporize the entire station in seconds, it never reached its target. The defensive grid intercepted the beam with a coordinated pulse of electromagnetic energy. The beam dispersed harmlessly. Its power scattered across millions of kilometers. On the Council fleet's sensors, nothing showed. No defensive satellites. No shield generators. Just empty space where their weapon should have destroyed a human colony. What? Marshal Vren stared at his tactical display in confusion. Fire again. Full spread this time. 20 ships fired simultaneously. 20 beams of destruction aimed at the mining colony. 20 beams intercepted and neutralized. Marshal Vren's tactical officer turned to him, her face pale. Sir, we're detecting massive energy discharges, but our sensors can't locate the source. It's like the weapons are hitting something invisible. There's no such thing as invisible shields, the Marshal snapped. But doubt crept into his voice. On the Times' defiant asterisk, Taeyang allowed himself a small smile. Thank you for confirming our defensive grid works, Marshal. Now, I'll give you the same warning I've given every enemy humanity has faced. He opened a channel to the entire Council fleet. This is Commander Taeyang of Earth. This is your last chance. Run while you can. For a moment, silence filled the void of space. Then Marshal Vren's face appeared on every human ship's screen. His expression was no longer amused or confident. It was furious. You dare threaten the Galactic Council? You dare mock us with your primitive tricks? He turned to his tactical officer. All ships, advance to combat range. Prepare to destroy every human vessel. Show them the price of defiance. The Council fleet surged forward, weapons hot, shields at maximum. 300 ships against 12. Hold positions, Taeyang ordered calmly. Wait for it. The Council fleet closed to firing range. Weapon locks activated across hundreds of ships. Targeting solutions calculated in milliseconds. Commander, Nari said quietly. They're about to fire on us directly. I know, Taeyang replied. Just wait. Marshal Vren raised his hand, about to give the order to fire. That's when the silent fleet arrived. They appeared without warning, jumping into normal space from the dark regions between stars. 200 human warships, twice the size of anything in the Council fleet. Their hulls black as night, their weapons already charging. They materialized in perfect formation, surrounding the Council fleet on all sides. Marshal Vren's tactical officer screamed something in her native language. The Council ships scrambled to react, but they had been caught completely off guard. Impossible, Marshal Vren whispered, staring at the displays showing human ships appearing everywhere. Our intelligence said you only had 12 vessels. Your intelligence, a new voice said over the communication channel, was wrong. Admiral Hyun's weathered face appeared on every screen in both fleets. He sat in the command chair of the Dreadnought Times' indomitable asterisk, looking more tired than threatening. Behind him, the ship's bridge showed levels of technology the Council had never seen humanity possess. I am Admiral Hyun of the Human Defense Fleet, he said quietly. Marshal Vren, you have entered our territory with hostile intent. You have attempted to destroy a civilian target. You have refused our warnings. He paused. You have left us with no choice. You're bluffing, Marshal Vren said, but his voice shook. You can't possibly have the firepower to. We don't bluff, Hyun interrupted. We really wanted you to run. We tried to warn you, but you didn't listen. So now, you're going to learn what humanity is truly capable of. Taeyang's voice cut across the channel. All human vessels. Weapons free. Light them up. The 12 ships at the terminus gate transformed. Hidden panels slid open, revealing weapons that had been concealed inside their hulls. Each ship was not a single vessel but a mobile platform carrying enough firepower to threaten a small planet. And they were the smallest ships in the human fleet. Fire, Taeyang ordered. The space around the terminus gate erupted in light and destruction. But it wasn't random chaos. It was precise, calculated, devastating. Humanity didn't fight to wound or to warn. They fought to ensure no one would ever threaten them again. Marshal Vren watched in horror as his fleet began to die. Council shields, designed to withstand energy weapons, crumpled under kinetic projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Ships that had survived 1,000 years of peace shattered like glass under weapons they had never imagined facing. The humans didn't just attack. They hunted. "Retreat!" Marshal Vren finally shouted, his composure completely shattered. "All ships, retreat immediately." But it was too late. The silent fleet had surrounded them. And as the Council ships tried to flee, they learned another terrible truth about humanity. Humans didn't let their enemies escape. From his command chair on the Time's indomitable asterisk, Admiral Hyun watched the battle with sad eyes. "Specialist Junho," he said quietly, "activate cyber warfare protocols." A young man at the cyber warfare station nodded. His fingers flew across controls that the Council had banned as too dangerous a century ago. All across the Council fleet, ship systems began to fail. Navigation computers showed false coordinates. Weapons targeting switched to random targets. Life support systems stuttered and recovered. And in 6 ships, the AI-assisted targeting completely reversed its identification codes. Those 6 ships began firing on their own fleet. "Stop this!" Marshal Vren screamed. But there was no stopping it now. His beautiful, ancient fleet was being torn apart by weapons it couldn't defend against, and tactics it had never encountered. "Casualties?" Hyun asked quietly. "Enemy. 108 ships destroyed, 74 disabled. Friendly. 0 destroyed, 2 damaged." Hyun closed his eyes briefly. So much death. So much waste. "Open a channel to Marshal Vren," he ordered. The young marshal appeared on screen, his face showing shock and disbelief. "This is us being merciful," Hyun said softly. "This is us holding back. This is us giving you one more chance." He leaned forward. "Retreat now, Marshal. Take what's left of your fleet and run. Because if we have to fight again, we won't show mercy twice." Marshal Vren stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, he gave the order to retreat. The Council fleet jumped away, leaving behind debris and the bodies of thousands. Scout Minho stood on the bridge of Marshal Vren's flagship as it limped through space, trying to reach the safety of Council territory. Around him, officers worked frantically to repair damaged systems while medical teams rushed to help the wounded. The bridge smelled of burnt electronics, and something worse that Minho tried not to think about. Of 300 ships, only 47 had escaped. The rest were either destroyed or left behind, too damaged to jump away. It was the worst military defeat in Council history, and humanity had suffered no losses at all. "How?" Marshal Vren kept asking, staring at the damage reports. "How did they do this? How?" Minho had been asking himself the same question for the past 6 hours, but he knew the answer now. He had spent weeks researching humanity, digging through their history, and he understood what the Council had missed. "They were preparing for this," Minho said quietly. "Not for days or months, for decades." The Marshal turned to him, his eyes wild. "Impossible. We monitored them since first contact. We knew everything about their capabilities." "No," Minho said. "We knew what they wanted us to know." He pulled up the files he had discovered in the archives, the ones Suji had tried to keep him from seeing. "Marshal, before you left for the attack, I found something in the human records, something the Council needs to understand. 20 years before official first contact, something had entered the solar system. The humans called them the Devourers. According to the fragmented records Minho had pieced together, they were a species the Council had encountered before. A species so dangerous that the Council had fled from them, abandoning entire sectors of space. The Devourers had found Earth by accident. They had seen the humans as easy prey, another primitive species to consume. They were wrong. The humans fought them for 5 years, Minho said, showing the evidence on the tactical display. 5 years of brutal warfare. The Devourers destroyed 3 human colonies and killed billions. But the humans didn't surrender. They didn't run. They hunted every single Devourer ship down and destroyed it. Marshal Vren stared at the data. The Devourers. No one defeats the Devourers. We lost entire fleets to them. The humans did more than defeat them, Minho continued. They studied them, learned from them, built weapons specifically designed to fight enemies the Council considers unbeatable. He paused. The Silent Fleet, those ships that ambushed us, they were built to fight the Devourers. We never stood a chance. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Why didn't the Council know about this? Someone asked. Because after the war, humanity cleaned up the evidence, Minho explained. They buried the shipwrecks. They erased the data trails. Then they waited for us to make first contact, acting like they had never fought anyone. He looked at the Marshal. They wanted to join the Council peacefully, but they were ready for war if it came. Marshal Vren sank into his command chair, looking decades older than he had this morning. Father needs to know, he whispered. The Council needs to understand what they're dealing with. In the Council chamber, Councillor Vren stood before the emergency session, his hands shaking as he read the casualty reports. The other representatives sat in shocked silence. Impossible, one councillor finally said. Our fleet was invincible. How could these primitive humans destroy it? Captain Jiho stepped forward from where he had been waiting at the edge of the chamber. His expression showed no triumph, only grim determination. Because you never asked the right questions, he said. You looked at our age and assumed we were weak. You saw our brief history in the galaxy and thought you knew everything about us. He walked to the center of the chamber. But you never asked about the 20 years before first contact. You never wondered why we had advanced warships when you found us. You never questioned why we were so eager to join the Council, while also being so protective of our territory. What happened in those years? Vren demanded. What are you hiding? We're not hiding anything, Jiho replied. We've been trying to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. 20 years before you found us, we encountered another species. The Devourers. The name sent ripples of fear through the Council. Several representatives made gestures of warding. The Devourers were a legend, a nightmare species that the Council had fled from centuries ago. The Devourers found Earth, Jiho continued. They tried to conquer us. They destroyed our colonies. They killed billions of our people. He paused. So we destroyed them. Every last one. Lies, Vren said. But his voice lacked conviction. Not lies. Truth. Jiho pulled out a data chip and inserted it into the Council's display system. This is footage from the final battle, the one where we destroyed the last Devourer hive ship. The holographic display activated, showing a battle that made the Terminus Gate conflict look tame. Human ships, primitive compared to Council vessels but armed with weapons of terrifying efficiency, swarmed around a massive alien construct. The Devourers fought back with the same ferocity that had driven the Council to flee. It didn't matter. The humans kept coming, kept fighting, kept adapting, and when the hive ship finally exploded, the humans didn't celebrate. They immediately began rescue operations and damage control. We learned something fighting the Devourers, Jiho said as the footage ended. We learned that there are species in this galaxy that want to destroy us simply because we exist. We learned that mercy means nothing to some enemies. We learned that survival requires strength. He looked directly at Vren. So we built the Silent Fleet, not to conquer anyone, not to threaten anyone, but to make sure no one could ever threaten us again. You deceived us, Vren said. You hid your true strength. We tried to be peaceful, Jiho corrected. We joined the Council. We followed your laws. We hoped that membership would mean safety, that we could finally stop fighting. His voice hardened. But you saw our desire for peace as weakness. You thought you could control us, dominate us, force us to submit, and when we refused, you sent your fleet to destroy us. Around the chamber, representatives began to understand the terrible mistake they had made. The humans gave us warnings, someone said quietly. They told us to run. Multiple times, another added. We thought they were bluffing. Jiho nodded. We were giving you chances to avoid this. Every warning was real. Every opportunity to back down was genuine. He spread his hands. But you chose war. So we gave you war. And now, you know what humanity is capable of. On Earth, Lieutenant Nari sat in a medical facility, talking to a counselor. The battle had ended hours ago, but her hands still shook when she closed her eyes. I killed people today, she said quietly. Thousands of them. My targeting solutions were perfect. Every shot I calculated hit exactly where I aimed. She looked up at the counselor. Why don't I feel worse about it? The counselor, a veteran of the Devourer War named Dr. Do-hyun, leaned forward. Because you did what needed to be done. The council gave us no choice. They threatened our civilians. They invaded our territory. You defended your home, but all those lives were the price of the council's arrogance, Do-hyun said firmly. They could have listened. They could have negotiated. They chose force. He paused. Nari, humanity didn't start this war, but we finished it. There's no shame in that. Nari nodded slowly, though the shaking didn't stop. She knew he was right. Knew the council had left them no choice. But knowing didn't make it easier. Will there be more fighting? She asked. I don't know, Do-hyun admitted. That depends on the council. Back in the council chamber, Councillor Vren stood before the assembly, his ancient pride finally broken. What do you want from us? He asked Jiho. Surrender? Tribute? Territory? We want what we've always wanted, Jiho replied. To be left alone. To live in peace. To protect our people. He paused. But we also want you to understand something very important. We didn't want to be the monsters. We didn't want to be the species that everyone fears. We wanted to be friends, partners, allies. And now? Now you know the truth, Jiho said. Humanity is a species from what we call a death world. A planet where everything tries to kill you from the moment you're born. We survived by being adaptable, resilient, and absolutely unwilling to give up. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. But we always chose survival. He walked closer to Vren's platform. You wanted to put us under protective custody. You thought we were too dangerous to be free. But you made a fundamental mistake. You assumed we were dangerous because we were young and violent. That's not why we're dangerous. He locked eyes with the counselor. We're dangerous because we've fought every step of our way to survival. We're dangerous because we've faced extinction and refused to accept it. We're dangerous because when you gave us a choice between being predators or prey, we chose predators. What happens now? Vren asked quietly. That depends on you, Jiho said. We can be enemies, and you can send more fleets to die at our borders. Or we can start again. This time with respect. This time with understanding. This time without lies or deception on either side. Around the chamber, representatives began to talk among themselves. The debate would last hours, maybe days. But the outcome was already clear. The council had started a war they couldn't win. Now they needed to find a way to make peace with the species they had underestimated so badly. And as Jiho waited for their decision, he thought about all the humans who had died fighting the Devourers. All the people who had sacrificed everything so humanity could survive. We warned you, he said quietly, too soft for anyone else to hear. We really did warn you. 3 months after the Battle of Terminus Gate, the Galactic Council looked very different. The Grand Chamber still stood. Its crystalline walls still reflected starlight, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Fear had replaced arrogance. Uncertainty had replaced confidence. Captain Jiho stood before the council once again. But this time he was not alone. Behind him stood a new team of human representatives, including Ambassador Hana, a diplomatic officer known for her patience and skill at negotiation. They were there to build something new. Councillor Vren looked older than he had 3 months ago. The defeat had broken something in him. But perhaps it had also made him wiser. Captain Jiho, Vren said, his voice lacking its former superiority. You requested this meeting. The council is listening. Jiho nodded. Thank you, Counselor. Before we begin, I need to share something with you. Something that changes everything you thought you knew about the council's own history. He gestured, and Suji stepped forward. She was no longer pretending to be a simple archivist. Now she wore the uniform of human diplomatic intelligence, and she carried a data chip that made several council members shift uncomfortably. During the past decade, Suji said, I've been embedded in your archives. My mission was to protect humanity by understanding you. But in the process, I discovered something you need to see. She activated the holographic display. Files appeared, showing council communications from decades ago. Internal memos, secret meetings, plans. 20 years ago, Suji explained. When the council first detected humanity, they didn't see potential friends. They saw a threat. These documents show that the council leadership planned to eliminate us before we could develop faster-than-light travel. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several representatives stood up in shock. The plan was called protective containment, Suji continued. It involved destroying Earth's industrial capacity, making it impossible for us to develop advanced technology. The casualties were estimated at 3 billion humans. The council leadership considered this acceptable to maintain their control of the galaxy. Vren's face went pale. That's not possible. The council doesn't commit genocide, doesn't it? Jiho asked quietly. Because we found records of 47 other species that were contained before they could join the council. Species that mysteriously lost their ability to progress technologically. Species that eventually died out or remained primitive forever. Scout Minho stood from where he had been sitting in the visitors section. He had defected to humanity after the battle, unable to reconcile what he had learned with his loyalty to the council. Captain Jiho speaks the truth, Minho said. I've verified these records. I was part of the intelligence service. I know how the council operates. He looked at his former colleagues. We were never the protectors we claimed to be. We were oppressors who used pretty words to hide our crimes. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other, demanding answers, denying knowledge, or simply sitting in stunned silence. Jiho let them argue for several minutes. Then he raised his hand, and slowly, the chamber quieted. I'm not sharing this to punish you, he said. I'm sharing it so you understand why humanity will never trust empty promises again. Why we built the silent fleet. Why we hid our true capabilities. He paused. We knew you planned to destroy us, so we prepared. And when you finally came for us, we were ready. What do you want? A representative from the Caltheris species asked. Revenge? Control of the council? Our worlds as tribute? No, Jiho said simply. We want reform. He pulled out another data chip. This one containing humanity's proposal. As the holographic display showed its contents, representatives leaned forward to read. We propose a new accord, Jiho explained. A complete restructuring of the Galactic Council. Real democracy, where every species has an equal vote. Protection for developing civilizations, not containment. Shared technology and resources. And most importantly, transparency. No more secret plans, no more hidden agendas. And if we refuse? Vren asked. Then we leave the council and establish our own alliance, Jiho said. We've already been contacted by 20 species who feel oppressed by the current system. They want to join us. Within a decade, there will be 2 major powers in the galaxy. The old council and the new alliance. He met Vren's eyes. And eventually, there will be war again. A war that will tear the galaxy apart. The chamber fell silent as the threat hung in the air. But it wasn't an aggressive threat. It was simply the truth, delivered with sadness rather than anger. Or, Ambassador Hana spoke for the first time, her voice gentle, we can work together. Humans don't want to conquer anyone. We just want to live in a galaxy where everyone is safe, where everyone has a voice, where no species needs to fear being contained or eliminated. Over the following weeks, Debate raged across Council space. Some species wanted to fight humanity, to restore the old order by force. Others saw opportunity in the proposed reforms. Many simply didn't know what to think. Lieutenant Nari, now retired from active service, taught strategic studies at Earth's military academy. Her classroom was always full, young officers eager to learn from the hero of Terminus Gate. But she never talked about the battle without also discussing the cost. "We won," she told her students. "We achieved a military victory that will be studied for centuries. But we also killed thousands of sentient beings. People with families, with dreams, with lives." She paused. "Never forget that cost. Never think war is glorious. It's necessary sometimes, but it's never glorious." One student raised her hand. "Lieutenant, if you could go back, would you change anything?" Nari thought for a long moment. "I would have tried harder to make them listen to our warnings. But if they still attacked, I would do exactly what I did. Because my duty is to protect humanity, and I fulfilled that duty." Admiral Hyun spent his retirement writing. His book, The Species Nobody Wanted to Understand, became required reading across both human and Council space. In it, he detailed not just the Terminus Gate battle, but the entire history of humanity's contact with the galaxy. The final chapter was titled, Learning to Trust. It ended with these words: "Learn. We are the monsters that nightmares fear. We are the species that survived a death world. We are the people who faced extinction and refused to die. But we are also capable of mercy, of kindness, of hope." The galaxy will have to decide which version of humanity they want to know, because the choice was never ours alone. It takes two sides to make peace. In the council chamber, 6 months after the battle, the vote finally took place. The new accord was put before the assembly. Every species had one vote, equal weight regardless of age or power. It was the first truly democratic vote in council history. The tally came in: 178 species in favor, 67 against. The new accord passed. Councillor Vren, who had voted in favor, approached Jiho after the session. "You could have destroyed us," he said quietly. "You had the power to crush the council completely. Why didn't you?" "Because that's not who we are," Jiho replied. "We fight when we have to. We defend ourselves without mercy when threatened. But we don't conquer. We don't oppress. We've seen what that kind of power does to species." He smiled slightly. "We nearly destroyed ourselves with it. Remember? The galaxy will fear you for a long time," Vren said. "I know," Jiho acknowledged. "But fear can turn into respect, given time. And maybe, eventually, it can turn into trust." As Jiho prepared to return to Earth, his mission complete, he stood one last time looking at the stars from the council station. So much had changed in such a short time. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Scout Minho found him there. The former Etherian had become one of humanity's strongest advocates, using his knowledge of council operations to help bridge the gap between species. "Do you think it will work?" Minho asked. "The new accord?" "I don't know," Jiho admitted. "Maybe we'll fail. Maybe in 100 years, the galaxy will return to the old ways. But we had to try. We had to show that there's another path." "You warned them to run," Minho said. "They didn't listen." "No," Jiho agreed. "They had to learn the hard way. Just like we learned everything the hard way." He turned to face Minho. "That's the human story. We make mistakes. We pay terrible prices. But we learn. We adapt. We survive. And now, we teach the galaxy what we learned. That survival doesn't require oppression. That strength doesn't require cruelty. That the monsters we warned about can choose to be something better." On Earth, 10 years after the Battle of Terminus Gate, things had settled into a new normal. The Silent Fleet remained active, but now it patrolled not just human space but served as the enforcement arm of the reformed Galactic Council. Human ships protected trade routes, responded to emergencies, and intervened when any species tried to oppress another. The phrase, "run while you can," had become famous across the galaxy. It was used as a warning, a joke, and a reminder all at once. Some species spoke it with fear, others with respect, a few even with fondness. Every new species joining the council was given a choice: read human history in full, or face the consequences of ignorance. Most chose to read. Those who did came away with a complex understanding of humanity, violent and peaceful, brutal and merciful, terrifying and inspiring. Earth's new motto was displayed on every human ship, written in 100 languages: "We warned you." But beneath it, in smaller letters, was another phrase: "Now, we protect you." Captain Jiho had retired to a quiet life on Earth, teaching diplomacy to the next generation. But sometimes, late at night, he would receive communications from across the galaxy. A species facing aggression, a colony under threat, a plea for help, and every time, his response was the same: "We're on our way." Because that was the choice humanity had made. To be feared, yes. To be respected, certainly. But also to be the protectors they wished had existed when the devourers came, to be the species that would stand between the weak and the strong. They hadn't wanted to be the monsters, but they had learned to live with the fear they inspired, because that fear kept the galaxy safe. Ambassador Hana once asked Jiho if he regretted anything about how events had unfolded. He thought for a long moment before answering. "I regret that we had to show them our teeth. I regret every life lost at Terminus Gate. I regret that fear is what earned us respect." He paused. "But I don't regret surviving. I don't regret protecting our people. And I don't regret forcing the council to change." "What do you think the future holds?" she asked. "I think humanity will never stop being dangerous," Jiho said. "We're from a death world. Violence is part of our nature. But so is cooperation. So is compassion. So is the ability to choose who we want to be." He smiled. "The galaxy learned that we're capable of terrible things. Now we need to show them we're capable of wonderful things too." As he spoke, somewhere in the depths of space, a human patrol ship responded to a distress call from a species under attack by pirates. The ship arrived, deployed its weapons with terrifying efficiency, and eliminated the threat in minutes. Then it helped repair the damaged colony ship and escorted it to safety. The colony's captain, a member of a species that had voted against the new accord, sent a message to the human ship. "Thank you. We were wrong about you." The human commander's response was simple. "We warned everyone we were dangerous. We never said we weren't also kind." Why? Why? And perhaps that was the real lesson of humanity's warning. They were monsters when they needed to be, heroes when they chose to be, and always, always survivors who refused to give up on being better than their worst fears. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. Now it was learning to hope alongside them. In the end, "Run while you can" wasn't just a warning of danger. It was a reminder that humanity would never stop moving forward, never stop fighting for survival, and never stop trying to make the galaxy a better place, even if they had to terrify everyone first to get the chance.